What's going on, everybody? Cassinated Music here. In this video, I'm going to be responding to a video that Joe Rogan put out, actually put out a couple months ago, in August of 2020 with Dr. Debrah. So they were talking about porn addiction, and I found it to be an interesting video. I hope you guys enjoy it. This is my reaction. Without further ado.
Joe Rogan experience.
You don't have any problem at all with porn. You think porn is fine and porn is recreational. A lot of people would push back against that. And a lot of people would push back and they would say that it's damaging to young women, that it objectifies women in a harmful way, and that it changes the way young people in particularly look at sex, and that they mirror and model themselves after these very unrealistic scenarios that are depicted in these films. What do you think about that?
Right. I've never said that I have no issue with porn. I would just say I'm not anti-porn, in that I think that pornography has a time and place. I think if you're an adult.
Okay. Can you be more specific? When's the time and when's the place? Is it the afternoon? Is it the morning?
Adults, and in terms of sex more broadly, whatever's consensual, that's your business. But I do think, for especially young children, I don't think that's good for their development. I don't think that that's a way that people should learn about what sex is going to be like, because pornography is not indicative of what real life sex is. And I think for people who are concerned that pornography is, there's so many different angles in terms of the criticisms of porn, but say one common criticism is that pornography makes men interested in things that are, potentially degrading to women. I do think there is some pornography that is not very nice in the way it depicts women, for sure. But I don't think viewing that is what makes men misogynistic or disrespectful of their partners. I think that's something that is inherent in them. And again, as someone who's
Whoa, that is a bold claim. Misogyny and sexual deviance is ingrained in them. There's no way pornography viewing could impact that. There's no way that consistent viewing of graphic sexual imagery or graphic violent sexual imagery could at all influence one's own fetishes. I feel like people who want to be like, porn is totally harmless, they're like trying to pull the wool over our head. Like they're trying to they're trying to trick us. Like it feels like we're being told to accept like just nonsense. It's like they say things like, for example, earlier in the video, let me back up because I gotta find this. Where is it?
I do think, for especially young children, I don't think that's good for their development.
Why not? Why isn't it good for their development? What about pornography is bad for their development? If misogyny and sexual deviance is already ingrained in the men, pornography has nothing to do with that, then why would pornography impact the development of a child? And why would it be negative? Oh, porn's bad for the development of a child. If somebody claims that pornography has led them to be sexually deviant or sexually violent, no, that was ingrained in them. So is it bad for development, or does it have no impact on development?
I don't think that
Let's fast forward.
For sure. But I don't think viewing that is what makes men misogynistic or disrespectful of their partners. I think that's something that is inherent in them. And again, as someone who's worked with sex offenders, antisociality is more predictive of someone's behavior in their...
Oh, do not get me wrong. There's truth to that. Pornography is not the sole blame. What she's saying about antisociality is true. Or somebody who is a sexual assaulter, those behaviors cannot solely be linked to pornography viewing. I mean, it's naive to say that one solitary source is responsible for such deviance. But to say it has no impact at all is also a little naive, because she's talking about sex offenders. What about somebody who's not a sex offender but has some problematic views about sex? Whose problematic views about sex has impacted his relationships? There is somewhere in between sexual deviant sex offender and perfectly healthy individual. If we're talking about addiction on extreme spectrums where it's criminal or non-criminal, then of course it's going to be hard to identify addictive patterns in anything. But if we know addiction to be a spectrum, there could be addicts with more severe addiction than you, then it becomes easier to identify the addictive patterns in, say, porn or gambling or gaming.
Views of women. It's not about being exposed to porn, because I think most pro-social men, if they see something that's very degrading and awful to women, they're going to say, that's horrible and I don't want to look at that.
Gary Wilson wrote a book called Your Brain on Porn. The book essentially surveys a lot of the porn literature out there. Not, it doesn't, no. It surveys research. Literature is often the term used to describe like research literature, but I just imagine someone saying, dude, somebody wrote a book with all the like the porn fan fiction. No. Gary Wilson wrote this book and kind of surveyed all the relevant research, but at the same time was also using testimonials from men, young men, who were talking about their porn addiction and the things that they struggle with, right? One of the most consistent things these men said was that their addiction to porn genuinely changed their fetishes, genuinely affected the way they viewed women to the point where they saw themselves completely objectifying them, and they found themselves watching problematic things. Now, some of them didn't go all the way to extreme violence. Some of them did, though, but all of them reported having escalated what they were watching because they felt like they needed to escalate what they were viewing. And that's consistent with what we know about the brain. That is consistent with what addiction researchers are learning about dopamine and about its effects on the brain and about the overstimulation of our brains when we watch something like porn and the constant need to re-up and find something. Everybody's heard it before. You get desensitized to the drugs, you have to go for a harder drug. That is a thing. And that's a thing with porn viewing. Like another scene, a more shocking scene, a more vivid scene, taboo scene, because shock, fear, and anxiety also is a triggering of dopamine release. There's a lot at play here. Hearst making these simplistic comments like, oh, it doesn't affect them. They probably just had that in them already. But then you said it was bad for their development. So how is it bad for their development? If it's bad, it must be bad, right? It must have an effect. Let's continue.
I think that porn is in a lot of ways like many things, like alcohol, for instance.
Porn is not like alcohol at all. Graphic sexual imagery and viewing graphic sexual imagery cannot be compared to anything that exists in terms of something that can be consumed with regard to the amount of chemicals it releases in your brain, the amount of dopamine it releases in your brain, the euphoria that your brain experiences. It can be compared to other things, and those other things are meth, drugs, like hard drugs. So him saying it's like alcohol is basically him trying to say this is a neutral thing that human beings can take negatively or positively. Now, he recognizes that it's an addiction because he has friends who tell him it's so. But Joe's not a neuroscientist, and Joe is not, I don't know if he's really interested in that topic. But him saying that is naive.
You can have a drink every now and then, or you can drink all day long and ruin your life. What is the problem? Is the problem the alcohol, or is it your behavior? Is it the human being?
When you experience a euphoric release of chemicals like masturbating to pornography, your brain changes. Neural pathways are created in your brain which basically link all like relief to pornography. As you continue to watch, think of a hayfield, okay? Michael J. Cusick makes this point. Think of a hayfield. If you drive a tractor over it multiple times, that hayfield becomes easier to drive through. Same thing with neural pathways in your brain. If every time you feel stressed you eat a cookie, you're creating patterns in your brain, and every time you do it, you're making it easier to go to that pattern. That's why starting a diet, that's why working out is hard, and you have to go through like a 2 or 3 week period, and then it becomes easier, right? Your brain's making connections. So when someone becomes hooked on porn, it's not that it's not that there's something wrong with them inherently. I mean, what's happening is their brain is being changed by a substance. You can't say, oh no, it's just that person. No, it's not just that person. The brain is being affected. It's being altered.
I think it's a human being, and human beings' obsessive, compulsive behavior.
What causes that? What causes those behaviors? You're observing the behaviors that are problematic, but you're neglecting to realize something's causing those behaviors. Something's feeding into that. Any guess?
And people's addiction to things. The addiction to pornography seems to be an issue. Like, there's some people that enjoy porn every now and then. They watch porn. They'd rather masturbate than have a relationship or whatever. Maybe they just don't want...
I mean, he says that like, it's just like a normal... Like, what you just described is misery. Like, you described something that anybody would say, that's probably not normal. If your 14-year-old son was doing that, you'd say, dude, you're not living a healthy lifestyle. He's taking it more like, hey, everybody can kind of do what they want. This is America. And I understand that, and I'm not making a legislative argument. I'm not saying, shut down the internet. What I'm saying is, you cannot say that what he just depicted, somebody who just rather masturbate than be in a relationship, is indicative of health. Like, you might not say it's indicative of unhealth or like, this person has some sort of pathological problem, but to say that it's like just perfectly normal, like, no, there's something going on within him, something that is averting him from intimacy. Could it be what he's watching?
But again, I don't think it's a porn problem. I think it's a human problem. It's the same thing as gambling. There's a lot of things that people get really obsessed with and they get addicted to. I don't think the problem is the individual thing. This has always been my take on porn, or and really on a lot of what we call vices. I don't think the problem is the things themselves, and I not just respect, I support individual choices. I love the fact that we have freedom. You can do whatever you want. I think you should be able to do anything. You should, as long as people aren't getting hurt by it.
I always laugh at that. As long as people aren't getting hurt by it, you should be able to do anything. What do we mean by people getting hurt by it? Also, if I'm not mistaken, Joe is a naturalist. It looks like he's looking right at me now. Do you guys see this? It looks like he's looking at me like, bro, did you just interrupt me? So funny. I gotta move. No, I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna take his glare. Joe, I believe, is a naturalist. I don't even think I think he's an atheist. Where does this notion of not wanting to hurt other people come into play? Where does this notion of wanting to look out for other people come into play? How does that benefit the species? I watched a documentary from Disney Plus on lions, and the lioness lost her ability to hunt, and they left her. They left her, okay? We wouldn't support that. We would say that that's hurting somebody, but they needed to do it to survive, understand? I find it interesting that this moral objective comes into play for people who generally, in the other, like for example, he just made a morally relativistic claim. These things aren't bad. It's just, what everybody wants to do. It's individual choices, but as long as it's not hurting anybody. But wait a minute. Is it an individual choice or is it a collective choice? Where do you suddenly get this authority to administer a moral judgment here?
Porn, in many ways, should be just people having sex. People and filming it.
Like when people do this type of thing, where like they ask the question and it sounds like a deep question, and I think he's saying something that does make somewhat sense. Like he's drawing a connection. He's basically saying sex isn't bad, so therefore why would depictions of sex be bad? What he's not realizing is pornography viewing is not sex. Like you're not having sex. The people that are being depicted are basically acting out dramatizations of sexual scenarios that are specifically designed to arouse a viewer. Joe's making it seem like pornography is essentially just biological human beings observing a biological act which they know is good and agreeing with it. But Joe doesn't realize that among the most popular pornography is incestuous porn between fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, siblings, fam. Like that's not normal sex. That's not natural sex. It's not healthy sex. So to live in this naive bubble of thinking that what you're looking on what you're seeing on a porn website is just depictions of sex, and the ones who are against it are just Puritans. We're enforcing puritanical sexual values, is so naive. It's trying to pull the wool over everybody's head, which is what annoys me about it.
Well, okay, to go back to your point about porn addiction, number one, there's no evidence for pornography addiction in that.
I need to introduce you to some of my friends.
Bro, what the heck did she just say?
It's so
just
taboo.
all over myself.
Well, okay, to go back to your point about porn addiction, number one, there's no evidence for pornography addiction.
Oh my God, bro, are you serious? No, I'm going to show you the evidence. I'm about to literally log into my library. Ruben Alarcon, 2019, online porn addiction, what we know and what we don't, a systematic review. I hope you guys understand something about this article. Look how long this article is. This article is reviewing all of the relevant research, all of it, even the research that claims to say that pornography addiction doesn't exist. It would not be absurd to assume its online variant has had a significant impact on its consumers, and that the AAA factors enhance the potential risk for problematic porn use and other sexual behaviors. As far as we know, a number of recent studies support this entity, problematic porn use, as an addiction with important clinical manifestations such as sexual dysfunction and psychosexual dissatisfaction. No evidence. This is a systematic review. This is viewing all the relevant research. Go to any library, type in porn addiction. Let's look at all the articles that come up. Ooh, let's look at all these articles that come up. These are peer-reviewed journals. Peer-reviewed journals, and some of them deny porn addiction. Some of these are as recent as 2020. What is she talking about? There's no evidence for it. Gary Wilson's book, Your Brain on Porn, literally shows it. Another thing, she's denying essentially her saying that there's no evidence for addiction to pornography is ignoring thousands of real people's testimonial about their addiction. Not to mention, you're wrong. There's plenty of evidence. There's plenty of literature. There's plenty of books on this that literally go through this. Dr. Kevin B. Skinner has an entire book just on treating pornography addicts, treating pornography addiction. Read Your Brain on Porn. I'm reading a book now on neuroplasticity and how the brain is plastic and the brain can change. And because it can change, it can be wired for certain things and basically unfit for other things. And so when you watch pornography, you wire your brain for it. Her doctoral thesis was in sexuality, I believe, was in hypersexuality in males. How does she not know about this? How does she not know about dopamine?
For sure. And like you're saying, there's some people who watch for hours. In the research I was doing before, there's some people I would talk to who literally sit and watch pornography 8-12 hours a day, and it's affecting work. They're up super late. They can't get up in the morning. It's affecting their
no evidence for porn addiction.
Relationships. That's not healthy. That's definitely excessive. I don't deny that exists, but that's not porn. That's not addiction. That's addiction. That's usually procrastination. It's procrastination.
Oh, wow. That's a weird point of view.
That was Joe trying to hide, like, what? What are you saying?
Literally sit and watch pornography 8-12 hours a day, and it's affecting work.
That's procrastination? Procrastination is a negative trait. It shows an inability to keep on task. It shows a lack of discipline. She's not seeing any connection to the person watching porn 8 hours a day to them procrastinating. She's not noticing causality there. She's just saying, oh, that just is procrastination. What would that be like? That person's not addicted to food. They're obese. Yeah, they are obese because they're addicted to food. I'm getting riled up.
They're up super late. They can't get up in the morning. It's affecting their relationships. In terms of, if you're talking about drug and alcohol addiction, it's not, because drug and alcohol addiction is characterized by tolerance and withdrawal. So
she keeps saying things like that doesn't apply to pornography. Again, Gary Wilson's book literally goes over this. Thousands of men have reported withdrawal symptoms: anxiety, hyperarousals, brain fog, numbness, porn-induced erectile dysfunction. These are things. She's acting like this stuff doesn't exist. Well, actually, I disagree. I just disagreed with myself. What am I doing? I don't think she acts like it doesn't exist. I think she genuinely does not know it exists. I think she reads things in an echo chamber. I think most people do. I think it's normal to do so. It's kind of hard to read authoritative literature that goes against you because it challenges you, and that's a difficult place to be. But she sounds woefully ignorant to what's out there in terms of information about addiction in general. And those are not the only two criteria for addiction, is tolerance and withdrawal. And by the way, porn addicts experience that. The Coolidge effect. Has she ever heard of it? Have you ever heard of it? I'll explain it to you. The Coolidge effect was named after Calvin Coolidge. I think he was visiting a farm, and the leader of that farm, like he's leading a freaking army. The farmer there was basically showing Coolidge these impressive, I think it was chickens, and saying, look, this chicken here can mate for hours and lay endless amount of eggs. Coolidge's wife says, you should tell that to Mr. Coolidge over here. Almost saying like, hey, he's gotta, hit the accelerator. Coolidge jokingly says to the farmer, is it with the same mate though? And he says no. And so the Coolidge effect is basically, it's an experiment they did on a rat. They had a male rat in this little box. I don't think it was a box. They tested it on a male rat, and what they found was that this rat, when presented with one mate to have sex and mate, eventually would grow tired and stop. But if a new mate was introduced, close to the point where he would finish the first sexual interaction with the one mate, he was able to continue to the point of death. They call that the Coolidge effect. It's what explains why guys can surf the web looking at porn for 8-10 hours till their eyes are blurry, till they're sore. When your brain releases those bursts of dopamine, and then when you click to another video, the novelty, because that's what pornography addiction is, guys. It's an addiction to novel sexual imagery. That's why it doesn't have to actually be a fully naked woman, fully naked man having sex. There's a lot of music videos out there that are porn. Novel sexual imagery. Novelty is the biggest part of it. What happens is, you are watching a scene. Eventually, your brain starts to become accustomed to the scene, become immune to the scene. It doesn't have the same effect on you. It's like eating the same meal every day. Then a novel scene, a new thumbnail that you click is introduced, and your brain releases more chemicals. Are you telling me this does not sound like tolerance to you? And then what happens if you stop doing this consistently? You don't think you're going to experience any withdrawals? It's nonsense. Not to mention, that's not the only criteria according to the DSM-5 for addictions. There's other criteria like failed attempts at stopping. That's a criteria for many addictions. So this perspective she's giving is a straw man. It's not accurate.
So some people will argue, like I said, with pornography, that if they watch it and they start watching more extreme versions of it, they're saying that this is, my tolerance. But if you actually sit and have a conversation with those people, they'll say, actually, this is what I've liked all along. It's just, it took me a while to accept that.
Who the heck is she talking to? Because I've had those same conversations of people disturbed by their porn viewing. Of people disturbed by the things they've watched. Like, I've had people say, I don't know why I watched that. So what is she talking about?
So there's no tolerance, and you don't see people having withdrawal when they stop.
That's not true.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's rewarding, but right. I think for a lot of people it's a coping strategy, and if you give them different coping strategies, suddenly they're not reliant on pornography to better.
You notice she used the word reliant. I should stop the video there. She literally used the word reliant. And she's making the point that when you introduced a healthy coping mechanism, suddenly they weren't needing porn anymore. Oh, did she make a differentiation between porn and a healthy coping mechanism?
To deal with stress.
But isn't that a strategy for getting over addiction? Like you would admit
yes.
addiction.
But the thing is with people with so-called pornography addiction, and research has shown this, if you give them other coping skills and ways to deal with stress in their life, or you teach them, they give them assertiveness training so that they are able to speak up about what's bothering them instead of turning to pornography as a way to feel better, it actually cuts down on how much their viewing time and how much they rely on it.
That's interesting, and I wonder if you...
She said that like that was a refutation. When you give them these healthy ways of coping with their life and some assertiveness training, they start to not use porn anymore. What does that sound like? That sounds like recovery.
I think there's a lot of people out there that are addicted to porn, but you never hear from them because there's so much shame attached to it.
Facts.
People who work with people with problems with pornography in a therapeutic context will say, that it's not an addiction.
What's she talking about? Dr. Kevin Skinner. Look him up. Here, I'm gonna look it up right now. Treating pornography addiction, the essential tools for recovery. Oh, that's a PhD I see there. George N. Collins, MA, talking about his helping people free themselves from sex and porn obsession.
I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing as opposed to gambling, right? Like, you're not going to get horny for gambling, right? There's not like an equivalent thing.
I love Joe Rogan so much. Like, I started jujitsu because of Joe Rogan. But, like, sometimes Joe Rogan says some things, bro, that, like, confuse me. I'm not even trying to be a hater. Nobody gets horny for gambling. I don't think that's true. Maybe not gambling, but a serial killer. Many of them are sexually aroused by their killing. The euphoria that releases in their brain is akin to a sexual release. So the notion that there's no parallel there, I don't think is fully true. But even then, not to be reactionary, I understand what Joe's saying. Gambling is different. It's not sexually related. And yes, pornography addiction is sexually related, but it's not merely as simple as these people are hypersexual or horny.
Right, and then it becomes a question of, can they integrate this back into their life in a healthy way without it becoming destructive again?
Yeah.
Why would they need to? Are our bodies designed for porn consumption? So if somebody's not able to function correctly without pornography, wouldn't that be indicative of a problem? If they're not able to sexually function without porn, if they're not able to achieve release without porn, isn't that a problem?
Why do you think it is that we have this weird take on sex? Because it's a weird thing that it seems to be, there's no problem with sex, but filming sex and showing sex is where things get strange.
Because sex is still considered stigmatized and it's taboo. And even when you're a sex scientist...
Oh my gosh, bro.
There's so much stigma around that. You would think that as a scientist that there would be some sort of removal of that perception, but no. So I think, I write a lot about sex positivity also. I think if we were to decrease all the stigma around human sexuality, that would help in so many ways.
Wow, what an answer. Great job. That was painful, y'all. All right, what she said at the end reminds me of what C.S. Lewis said about the sexual instinct in Mere Christianity. There are taboo natures of sex. There are taboo natures of everything. Something being taboo doesn't necessarily indicate that it's being forced there by an oppressive force. Sometimes things are taboo. Sometimes things have evolved or developed into an unhealthy place. He made a perfect parallel. C.S. Lewis said, if I were to show you a group of people sitting in a theater, similar to when people go to look at a striptease act, And yet, instead of a woman on stage, there was a table with a sheet over a plate with the napkin slowly being lifted to reveal a roast mutton with everybody salivating in their seats. Wouldn't you think something went wrong with the food instinct in that world, with the eating instinct? You would. So why not the same parallel with the sex instinct? If you're a naturalist, if you're an atheist, and if you think that we're just biological and like there's no meaning to anything, there's no purpose, there's no morals, then yeah, it doesn't make any sense to say that pornography is dangerous and wrong. But if you believe that there is some sort of moral code, like whatever your belief is, whether you believe in God and the universe or whatever you believe in, if you believe there's a moral code, if you believe that there is morality in the world and that there are objective morals, then we can objectively make adjudicating statements about things that are morally ideal and things that are morally not ideal. But again, it's dangerous when we have individuals downplaying this issue because they are not well read on the topic. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. But the notion that sex is taboo and sex positivity and sex is still stigmatized, pornography is not sex. Depiction of a woman being raped in a porn scene, that's not sex. That should be taboo. That's an appropriate feeling looking at that, saying that that's taboo. Incestuous porn. Pornhub deleted 60% of its videos or something like that because they were linked to human trafficking. You're sitting here telling me, oh, it's just sex and the people who are against it are just puritanical? Get out of here with that nonsense. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel. Comment below what you thought of it. I really think that it was a very interesting video. I got a little riled up and passionate, but this subject tends to do that to me. So thank you again for watching. And don't forget, subscribe below. Thank you. You have a great day.